Hello and welcome to another edition of The Tigers Down Under. I'm Alex, and with me tonight I have Logan. How are you, Logan?
Good evening, Alex. Yeah, it's good to be here. I'm doing well. Obviously, it's been a good week following the win over Bristol, so we're in good spirits.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I mean, we'll touch on that Peterborough game first of all, but it is great to see that the trends continued, that we were able to follow a loss with a victory. We'll look at that Peterborough game first, though, and it was a bit of a head scratcher, as McGann put it. It was a bit of a strange one in the sense that we actually arguably played better than Peterborough did, and created more of the better chances in the match, up until the point where they scored 2 goals, unfortunately. How did you see it? And did you think the result was a fair reflection on the match?
I'd have to agree with McCann in the sense that I thought it was some of the most attractive football we've seen City play at this level, particularly. I thought that they really looked up for the contest, and particularly after Wilkes got that first goal, it was really hard to kind of fathom at half time that would be on the end of a result or a loss in the fashion that we were. It just you had that feeling that there was a second one coming for us, far more than there was an equaliser. And I guess if you look at both of the Peterborough goals, like I guess they were somewhat fashioned in a surprising manner. And at the end of 90 minutes, even the way we finished the game, you still kind of got the sense that there was going to be an equaliser. When Wilkes hit the post again, it really just kind of almost felt like we were overplaying our hand, but we played in such a positive way that the fact that we didn't get that second goal, I think, was deflating. But in so many ways, I think that the performance on the whole brought so much confidence, and it showed us exactly what we can kind of play like when all things are clicking. I say that kind of mindfully, that we didn't get the result, but I guess there were so many takeaways from that game that even though it was bitter to feel the loss, I think that it was done in such a positive manner that we were able to take those things and then obviously bounce back against Bristol. So I guess if we were to look at the big picture of the last 7 days, whilst a negative result, such a positive feeling would still be existing in the camp, I would suggest.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think we played really well against Peterborough in transition. There was a couple of times where we were able to take the ball right up the park from our defensive line, essentially, and turn it into an attack, which was really impressive to see. I found the difference between this loss and the Fleetwood loss was certainly that we didn't drop our heads to the same extent that we did against Fleetwood, and really, as you said, looked a chance at getting an equaliser late. And even just the manner of the Peterborough goals, they weren't as soft as the Fleetwood ones were. I think arguably perhaps the first Peterborough goal was a little bit poor defending on the part of, I think it was, I don't know if it was Burke or Greaves who was sort of under or behind Clark Harris when he got that header. But certainly there's not a whole lot you can do about their second goal, which was really just a fortunate deflection. But as you said, I mean, Wilkes' goal I thought was taken terrifically. He then hit the post. He had a couple of other chances as well. So, Doherty had a great chance from outside the box as well. So we certainly had our chances, and it was a really battling sort of performance. And we'd sort of said before this match that this was our first real test of the season in the sense that we were playing a team up the top of the table near us, rather than a mid-table side. So really promising display and really encouraging signs for the side to kick on with. Before we do move on to that more positive win against Bristol Rovers, I was just going to give my 3 MVP votes for the match, and I think it's hard to look past Wilkes for the 3 votes. The terrific goal that he scored, as well as his other efforts looking quite dangerous up forward. I'd probably give Honeyman the 2, and I suspect he's already sort of emerging as a player of the season candidate. He's sort of in the votes every week just from his efforts around the pitch, that he's creating chances. His running is just tireless, and it's just fantastic to see. And then I'd probably give the 1 to I'm giving it to Smallwood, just because I think he goes a little bit under the radar, because he's another one along with Honeyman who really holds that midfield together. And we were sort of saying last week that it's no coincidence that since he's been back in the side, we've looked a lot more defensively solid than we did against Fleetwood. So Another top display from him as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd find it hard to argue with any of those votes. I think one of the rare finds, or the thing that really stands out to me, or the player who is just performing in a way that I kind of wasn't expecting. You kind of mentioned Smallwood as being a surprise for just the fashion he is, but Josh Emmanuel has been massive week in, week out for us, and really just there's such a presence about someone of his stature who is incredibly mobile for his size and really looks to get forward. And he just he has impressed me so much, and it's hard to kind of overlook him for points in almost every match so far of this season. He's been great to watch.
No, definitely. He's certainly linking up really well with Wilkes down that right-hand side when Wilkes is playing on that side. So, no, he just continues to impress each and every week. We'll talk about that Bristol Rovers game now, which it seems like whenever we lose a game this season, we really challenge the players to bounce back. And to be fair, this game didn't get off to the perfect start. It got off to a manner that was pretty familiar with last season, with that conceding of a goal in the first minute or two of the game. And you wouldn't be blamed for thinking that we were kind of going down the same road that we had last season, with those early goals being conceded and then the players sort of dropping their heads. I guess the one interesting element of the fact we did make the triple substitution, which I'm led to believe is the first time in our history that all three substitutes have scored in a game, which is pretty impressive. I was a little bit surprised at the time, only because we came out from halftime actually looking much better, much more invigorated and keen to go out and attack. So there was a little bit of danger there from my point of view of sort of interrupting that momentum and that more positive attitude from the players. But of course also the risk you run with a triple substitution is if there's an injury later in the game. But it paid off. McGann took the gamble and it paid off, and it paid off handsomely. So how did you see, I guess, especially the response to that Bristol Rovers goal and how he went on to win the match?
Yeah, I think that, as you mentioned, the kind of heartache of the fashion of that loss of Peterborough, feeling incredibly hard done by, and then to fall behind in such an early manner as well. I guess the concern was always going to be there that, as you said, the Fleetwood result is, were we going to drop in our heads? And that if you look at that 45 minutes in isolation of the back end of a Peterborough result and then the start of Bristol, all the signs were there that it could have been one of those moments. We've been uber critical of McCann in the past about some of his decisions as a manager, and I guess maybe waiting too long to make substitutions or making like-for-like swaps when the game really seems in the balance. And I thought that, as you said, it was quite a courageous decision. I mean, in some ways it was a no-brainer because he needed to react in some way to kind of do it in that fashion and to make a triple sub, which is something that we don't often see from him. We obviously got the result, and I think it's one of those times where we have to kind of eat our words and reflect on the guy who's in the position, and maybe there's a lot more to McCann's understanding of League One than certainly ours as we drop down the division and try to adjust to life. It certainly seems like a ready-made fix that maybe he does know this division well and is able to kind of make those more, I guess, courageous decisions than perhaps if he's in the Championship and maybe feels a little bit more pressure or doesn't quite allow for some of the differences in the style of football that the League One offers to the Championship.
Yeah, I mean, my only thought would be whether he should have made a change or two changes at halftime. Whether you throw KLP on for Adelican at halftime or you throw Slater into the midfield. I guess if you wanted a bit more steel there. I just found it interesting because it was only at about the 55th minute, I think. So it seems strange to give 10 minutes into the half. I'd almost expect if you'd given the 10 minutes and the players had still looked really sloppy or their heads were down or anything like that, then you kind of go, okay, I've given them the chance to respond, and they haven't. But they seem to be sort of picking up the energy. Maybe he just didn't say something that he liked in Adelican's performance, or, Magennis, I don't think he necessarily had a terrible game, but he didn't offer as much energy as Eves then did when he came on. Magennis, to me, in the first half seemed as if he was just, he was getting to the right positions, just, a second or two too slow. He just wasn't getting to the ball in time to get to make the most of the chances. But look, full credit to Eves when he's come on. He's got the assist for Slater, and then he's got a goal for himself in the final minute of the game. And it's what he needed. It's going to give him a bit of confidence now. He looked as if in the last few games he was really desperate to get on the score sheet and sort of start his campaign in a positive way. And he's done that in this game. He's got his goal. And how do you see that impacting him going forward? Do you think perhaps he now comes in as the number one striker?
I think it's really hard to overlook. And I'm glad you brought it up. If we think about Tom Eves, he has, I think it's something like 38 goals in 2 seasons for Gillian. He's incredibly prolific at this level. And I guess he's almost been the forgotten man, so to speak, in the start of the season with the form that Wilkes has been in. And obviously McCann does take a likening to Magennis. So I think that Tom Eves is going to be far more vital for us down the stretch. I think that he probably sits in my ranking of our forward line. I think I would put him ahead of Magennis, although in saying that, I don't think that Magennis doesn't have a role. I really like the fact that he does throw himself about, is a presence and does know how to sniff a goal every now and then. I just do think that with the pedigree and I guess the goal return that Tom Eves does have at this level, once he plays himself back into form, and like we said, if he does pick up another couple of goals on the back of the one that he scored at Bristol late in the game, I think he will, really start to kind of find his form and grow in confidence. And there's no reason why he can't go on and give us a similar return as to what Malik Wilkes is providing at this point in time.
Yeah, and I guess it's also worth noting that in the 2 changes to the side from the weekend, Device and Adelican came back in for Lewis Potter and Greaves. McCann basically said that Greaves was just getting a rest. It's 3 games in 7 days for young players. A bit much for him at that age. So just kind of managing his minutes. Would you sort of? I guess it's a hard one on what our best 2 centre backs are at the moment, because Greaves certainly hasn't looked out of place when he's played, but it's also hard to look past Device. When he's playing well, Device is certainly capable and certainly is one of our best 2 centre-backs. But whether you sort of look at Greaves as one for the future who's sort of getting the minutes in his legs now and should get that run until he puts a foot wrong.
Yeah, it's a really difficult decision to make. And I guess it almost reminds me of the shades of the time when we had Alex Bruce and Curtis Davies and Dawson and Harry Maguire. And it was almost one of those times when we knew Harry Maguire was going to be something special, but when was he going to actually, take precedence over some of those guys on the roster already? And there will be a little bit of trial and error. I suspect that McCann has, the trusted partnership of Burke and Device. Although I dare say towards the back end of the championship, I'm not sure how trusted it was. I think that he does tend to favour that, perhaps with the incentive that the 2 championship players playing in League One, perhaps is how he looks at it. But I think from a City perspective, we have to be wrapped with the way Greaves is playing at the moment. And he's, as you mentioned, he's shown that he can come in and not only do a job, but he's absolutely capable of playing at this level and perhaps surpassing it eventually. But I don't see it as an issue. I just see it as such a promising thing for us moving forward, and also knowing the fact that Device has had his injury problems in the past, and the fact that we can rely on Greaves is a huge asset and bonus for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So then I guess for my MVPs for this match, I'd probably go, that man again, Honeyman, for the 3 votes. I think he was terrific in the game again. I think I'll actually go for Eves for the 2. I think just for the assist and the goal for himself, it was really vital for him to get into the game and have that impact. So I think that was terrific to see. And then I'll give the 1 vote to Lewis Potter, who's is a fantastic header to open the scoring. And I can't. It's a funny one. It's like Timmy Cahill for Australia, where it's kind of hard to fathom at times how such a short player can get so many headed goals, but he popped up with another one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to agree with all 3 of those votes. I think the only one as well that I would add, and it's merely because of the goal, was Slater getting on the score sheet too.
Yep.
That he's somewhat of an unknown quantity amongst the City fans at the moment, given the fact that we didn't know too much about him. It was somewhat of a surprise signing. And for him to pop up and get that goal in the manner that he did as well, really, I think it speaks into this playing group and the potential that does exist there. And it's just exciting to watch football again, where you can see the hunger. And I think players like him, Greaves that we mentioned coming into the side, there's a real youth aspect to it. And it was really promising.
And we've got Scott and Samuelson, who aren't even making the squad at the moment.
Yeah, and as you've already touched on as well, with the way that Keen Lewis Potter's playing as well, there is so much potential in this group, and something that I guess we almost look like a reinvigorated squad.
Yeah, I still can't get my head around. I've said it a few times now that it almost feels like we've got a better squad this season than we did in the second half of last season. It's our strategy last season seemed to be recruiting League One players, and that's the same strategy that we have this season. So in a way, we're sort of actually strengthening our squad this season. So it is a funny one. And we sort of said at the start of the season as well that, as terrible as it is and as negative as it is to be down in League One, and we'd always rather be up in the Championship, this has now given us this chance, as you say, to have almost reinvigorated the squad. We've got this younger, hungrier squad. If we are to go up to the Championship next season, suddenly we have a much more cohesive unit to tackle the Championship next season than necessarily we had when we fell out of it.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the characteristics of all of that you've mentioned, and it fills me with guilt every week as I reflect on George Honeyman and the player that he is at this level. It was really frustrating to kind of see him getting a start every week in the Championship, because I just couldn't warrant it or fathom it. And then you look at the leader that he's become and how much of a central role he's got with the younger guys around him. It's blowing me away, and it's really refreshing to see a player like that who was very long discarded, at least in my mind, to see the role that he has to play in. It's great to watch.
Definitely, and hopefully it continues throughout this season. He's having a terrific season. We'll move on then and discuss, I guess the main off-field matter to discuss this week is the fantastic Chris Chilton fundraiser that's been set up in the last couple of days. I think it's been running for a bit over 2 days now, and it's already raised over £25,000, which is absolutely terrific. Chris Chilton, obviously one of the all-time greats of Hull City, leading goal scorer for the club, who's now struggling with Alzheimer's and dementia and really requires 24-hour care, which is really heartbreaking to hear about. But it's great to see the amount of support that's already come through from the city community and the level of donations that we've already seen. So we just wanted to take this chance during the podcast to really promote that. And we'll tweet out the link again. We've already sort of shared it around the last few days, but we'll tweet it out again for everyone to hopefully be able to donate to a really worthy cause.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, Alex, I can speak for you in saying as well, having been over and spent some time in Hull ourselves and following the team around, it is an incredibly tight-knit community with a really great sense of care for each other. And I guess the role that the football club plays in that as well is a massive one. And what sport means, obviously, Hull being a massive rugby league community, but also what that football club does mean. And it's great to see the people of Hull getting behind that cause. And as you said, it's even for the Australians who understand what that place is and how many fond, I guess, memories and times we've had, to consider donating to that cause as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that people can donate is obviously welcome and goes a long way to assisting with Chris Chilton, which would be fantastic. We'll move on to our player of the week, or our player in review that we'll look at for this week. And I'm starting to look ahead and thinking it's going to be interesting to see what we are going to end up reviewing some players that have only just signed, I think, because there's going to be more weeks in the season than there are players in the squad. But for now, we've got players who've been with us for at least a little bit longer, with George Long, who are signed for us back in 2018 now for a pretty modest fee. I think it might have even been for a free transfer. I'm not entirely sure. But in that time, he's now made 49 appearances for us and has kept 7 clean sheets. When we lost David Marshall at the end of the season prior to last, it almost seemed quite a foregone conclusion that Long would be the new number one at City, and he was for essentially all of last season. I think he only fell out of the side for a couple of games near the end when Ingram came in. but it was a really odd one, because up until I sort of look at that FA Cup game against Chelsea as almost the turning point for City last season, where everything seemed to be going right up until that point. We had the sellout stadium for the Chelsea game. We had Bowen and Grzycki obviously in the side at that point. We were, on the cusp of the playoffs. Long had a terrific game that day, and that's actually probably my highlight of his career at City so far, was his display in that game, where coming up against Premier League opposition, he looked fantastic and really looked like he belonged at that level. And then obviously from that point on, sold Grzycki, sold Bowen, everything kind of unraveled on the pitch at the club. And Long's form seemed to unravel with it. I guess it can't help for a goalkeeper when you're playing in a game and through no fault of your own, you might be conceding 4 or 5 goals against whether it was Leeds or Brentford or a couple of other clubs around that time as well. But with some of the games, it just seemed as if his confidence just completely deserted him, and his form fell away as well. So it's a really tricky one to read, considering the fact that Ingram started this season so well. Where do you see Long's place at the club at the moment? And do you see a path back to the number 1 shirt for him? Or do you see it more now as this is the order, and he might then need to move on if he wants first team football?
I think it's a very good question, in the sense that I think that, as you said, George Long for a long time was unchallenged, and it never even seemed likely that Ingram would find his place in the side. And I guess if we fast forward now, and as you mentioned, see the start that Ingram has had, there's absolutely no way that you could justify George Long coming in and taking over that number 1 role I guess, at this point in time, based on previous performances. I guess that one of the things that I've made the mistake of in the past, I think we're all guilty of it, is being wary of a keeper who is out of form as opposed to a keeper who is poor. I think David Marshall has proved that as well.
I was going to say, because it's almost an identical situation to when Jakupovic took over the number 1 shirt from Marshall, and then Marshall came back in and was terrific in the championship. Yeah.
Exactly right. And I think that that's one of the healthiest things for a keeper, is the competition. So I see it as a positive for the club. It's difficult to talk about George Long personally as far as his commitment to the club, what he's thinking. Obviously, City have dropped down a division and he's no longer the number 1 choice in League One. So I could see how his mind would be looking at, is this the right place for me? Behind closed doors, and I guess that's normal. But if we do think about the big picture, all it would take is for an injury to Ingram and George Long to get a chance. He may come in reinvigorated and see that as his huge opportunity. And with those cases that we've already mentioned, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that he could come in and recapture the form that you mentioned, he had shown us glimpses of, like in the Chelsea game. So I wouldn't write him off. But at this point in time, with the way Ingram's playing, he's definitely a distant memory for us, with seemingly little role to play. But I would be more than happy for him to prove that wrong.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure he'll get his chances, at least in the FA Cup, where incidentally we've been drawn against Fleetwood. So it will be nice to get a bit of revenge on them. And I'm sure he'll get his chance in that game. And, we've also got that EFL trophy, which seems to be perpetually postponed. So I don't know if that's even going to go ahead, but it's in some ways it's an odd one that in League One we've probably got more games to play than we did in the Championship, and more opportunity for these depth players to really prove themselves. So as you say, he'll certainly get his chances this season, and may well come back into the side at some stage as well. And he's shown in the past that he is a decent keeper, and he would be a dependable number 1. And as you say, it's almost the perfect comparison to the Marshall and Jakupovic situation previously. So, look, it's going to be an interesting one. And I guess when we signed Ingram, it wasn't initially apparent that we were essentially bringing in another top quality keeper, as he's turned out to be, where, as you say, we've now got this really great competition for that number 1 shirt that you otherwise might not have had if it was just a purely secondary keeper that was being brought in. So that's great to see. We'll look ahead now to the Swindon Town game this weekend. We've had our game against Accrington Stanley next Tuesday postponed due to COVID reasons. which is sort of a welcome midweek break. So we've just got the one game to look forward to now, which is against Swindon, who are the fourth of the 4 promoted clubs for this season. So we've played the other 3 already. Interestingly, I'd completely forgotten that Phil Brown was at Swindon, and it was their current manager, Richie Wellens, who took over from him last season and managed to win. I think they finished on top of League 2 on the points per game calculation that they did, which is pretty impressive for them. We also haven't beaten Swindon since 1990, and I think there's been about 4 or 5 games between the two sides since then as well. So it's not as if it's just since 1990 that we played them. So that'll be an interesting one to put to rest. I think against Bristol Rovers, we hadn't beaten them at their ground since since 1990 or something like that either. So it'll be nice to get a few records dusted off. But, in terms of their form so far to start the season, they've lost 4 of their last 5 games. They've only beaten Burton in that time, which, given Burton's form, probably isn't the most impressive of results, which would kind of, it gives us confidence. We've done pretty well against the other promoted clubs so far this season, and should be going into this one pretty confident of a result as well.
You would think so. I think that's one of the difficulties for us as we consider what life in League One looks like is, I guess Fleetwood on paper was probably a fixture that we fancied, especially given the form and travelling there. But given the weather conditions and playing on a very, very different field, with all due respect to Fleetwood, those types of grounds, and I suspect that the trip to the county ground will be very similar fashion. It will be one of those unknown kind of grinding games that we're expected to win. And I guess the challenge of for this playing group will be complacency. We start to fly and people start to talk about Hull City being a big fish in a small pond, and I guess having the table position to match that. All of those teams are certainly going to be up for the contest of playing Hull City and hosting them. And so whilst it looks like a fixture that we should win, particularly on the back of the way that we've been playing and even the style of football we've been playing, if we consider the Peterborough game, I think this one does present as quite a difficult under-the-radar task. And I'm concerned about it. I'm optimistic, but I do think that there is a level of fear that we do have to have, healthy fear, respect for who Swindon are. And even though they are sitting lowly on the ladder, I wouldn't be surprised if this was much closer and I guess concerning than we think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in some ways that Fleetwood game is a really good one to have in the books, because we can look at that with a healthy dose of this is what can happen if we switch off, if we don't turn up prepared to play, if we don't have that hunger. But it doesn't have the scars that, for instance, the Wigan game last season would have, where we did bounce back from the Fleetwood game with 2 wins. So we can look at it in isolation and use that as a really good message without it sort of causing the players to go back into their shells. Peterborough game was just 2 good sides going at it, and one of them came away with the 3 points. I don't think we have as much to be concerned about with that one. But yeah, I think you're right. It's crazy that, we've played 9 games already, so after the Swindon game, we're almost a quarter of the way through the season and sitting pretty healthily in the table. You do sort of have to keep motivating the players and keep that focus so that they're not taking their eyes off the ball and starting to assume that we've got results before we win them. But it's all part of the management that McCann's going to have to keep working on and keep the players focused and motivated, because we're in a really good position as it stands. If we were to be able to go up automatically, that would be fantastic. But there's a lot of games to go before then, and I don't think we can take too many assumptions based on our start so far.
No, absolutely right. And I think that also just adding on to that is, if we consider the playing group and I guess the fact that we do have a really nice balance of youth with a few of those well-travelled, experienced players like your George Honeymans, your Magenesis, your Eveses, these fixtures are certainly, I guess, it's more capable for us to look at them and being realistic and understand that they do present a real challenge, and getting complacent isn't something that will be tolerated in this playing group. Whereas I suspect that if we reflect on the championship group, there was probably an element of complacency in some of the fixtures and the way that we actually approach those games.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was probably an element of thinking we were too big a club to go down, and that bubble certainly burst. So I wouldn't be taking any fixtures in this league lightly. You just look at, Sunderland are sitting there in seventh, 6 points behind us, and they're in some respects a bigger club than we are. And they're not finding it a very easy league to get out of either. So we're in a great position. We've had a good start. We have to use this as a good opportunity to build on and go from here. I guess just before we head off, a score prediction for this one, or how you see this one going?
Yeah, I can see this probably being a 2-1 victory, and I do get the feeling that there could be kind of a concerning goal, whether it's early in the game that kind of similar to the Bristol game where we have to wake up. But I still see us being too strong, but I think it will present a pretty difficult test for us. So going 2-1 City.
I'm probably going to hope for a clean sheet, and it might be a bit futile in saying that because we've been pretty good so far this season. I think the Bristol Rovers game was a bit concerning with the manner of the goal, just in the sense that it gave that flashback to last season. So hopefully we can tighten up a little bit and keep our focus going. It's interesting to see that we're the second top scorers in the division, which I guess is kind of natural given the fact that we've won as many games as we have. But it's great to see. So I'm hoping maybe a 2-0 or a 3-0 victory, and I'd love to see Eves get another couple of goals to keep that run of confidence going for him. And of course, Lewis Potter's scoring is always a welcome sight as well. So I'll probably go for a 3-0 victory based on that, and hopefully we can fulfill that. But we'll be back next week to cover the result, and hopefully it's a win. But until then, thanks for joining me, Logan.
Not a problem. Great to be here.
No worries. And thanks everyone for listening in. We'll be back this time next week to cover the Swindon game. But until then, come on City.